Talon Vex had seen many things in his lifetime: battles across star systems, dangerous encounters with ruthless enemies, and the harsh realities of galactic warfare. He had survived it all, earning a reputation as one of the finest warriors in the galaxy. His name alone was enough to make any enemy think twice, but nothing could have prepared him for the invitation he received one fateful day. It wasn't a call to arms or a summons from a military leader, but an invitation to an alien wedding. The envelope was unlike any Talon had ever seen. It shimmered in the light, its surface adorned with intricate designs that shifted as if alive. He had expected a message from the Galactic Council, or perhaps from an old ally seeking assistance. Instead, it was from the Eldrians, a peaceful but powerful alien race known for their ancient traditions and technological marvels. The invitation came directly from the King of Eldria himself. Talon, never one to shy away from the unknown, accepted the invitation. He didn't know why. Perhaps it was the curiosity that drove him, or the sheer strangeness of it all. He wasn't one for parties or social gatherings, especially not those of an alien nature. But there was something about the Eldrians that intrigued him. They were known to be a reclusive species, living on a lush planet hidden deep within the galaxy's core, untouched by the wars and politics that plagued most civilizations. The invitation itself was a mystery, and Talon was determined to uncover its purpose. The journey to Eldria was long, taking several weeks as his ship navigated through hyperspace. The trip was uneventful, but Talon spent the time reflecting on his life. He had seen countless worlds, each unique in its own way, yet none as peaceful as the Eldrians. When he finally arrived, his ship descended toward the planet's surface, where he saw sprawling forests, towering mountains, and a single great city that gleamed under the twin suns. Eldria was a world that seemed untouched by time, its beauty both serene and intimidating. Upon landing, Talon was greeted by a group of Eldrians, tall and elegant beings with skin that shimmered like polished silver. They wore flowing robes that seemed to shift colors with the light, their eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly hue. Talon was struck by their otherworldly grace, but he knew better than to show surprise. He had faced countless strange creatures in his time, but this was different. This was diplomacy, and he was here as a guest. The Eldrians escorted him to the heart of their city, where the wedding was to take place. The architecture was nothing like anything Talon had ever seen, elegant structures that blended seamlessly with nature. Trees, vines, and flowers grew up the sides of the buildings, their roots intertwining with the walls. It was as if the city itself was alive, a living testament to the Eldrians' harmony with nature and technology. As Talon entered the grand hall, the scale of the event became apparent. The hall was enormous, with a ceiling that stretched higher than anything he had ever imagined. Hundreds of Eldrians gathered in silence, their faces serene as they awaited the arrival of the bride and groom. The air was thick with anticipation, and Talon couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was a sacred event, one that transcended the mere exchange of vows. The marriage of Princess Ishara Eldra, daughter of King Thaler, was more than just a union of two individuals. It was a symbol of peace, a bond that would tie together the fates of entire civilizations. Talon, however, was an outsider. He didn't understand the significance of the ceremony, nor did he know why he had been invited. He was just a warrior, a man of action, and the prospect of standing in the midst of such a formal occasion made him uncomfortable. Yet, as the guests took their seats, he found himself drawn into the grandeur of the ceremony. The Eldrians performed rituals that were as old as their species, each one more intricate and beautiful than the last. The energy in the room was palpable, and Talon couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The princess finally entered, and Talon's breath caught in his throat. Ishara Eldra was a vision of beauty, her presence commanding the room with every step she took. Her silver hair flowed behind her, shimmering like starlight, and her eyes, deep pools of violet, held a quiet power. She was tall, regal, and graceful, her movements fluid and effortless. The gown she wore seemed to be woven from the very fabric of the stars themselves, adorned with intricate patterns that shifted and changed with every movement. She was the very embodiment of Eldrian royalty. As she made her way down the aisle, Talon couldn't help but watch her. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that drew him in despite his best efforts to remain detached. He had faced countless battles, fought beside warriors from all corners of the galaxy, but there was a quiet strength in Ishara that resonated with him. She was not just a princess, but a leader in her own right, and Talon couldn't help but wonder what fate had in store for her. The ceremony progressed, and Talon found himself caught up in the proceedings. The vows were exchanged, the ancient rituals were performed, and the entire event felt like a dance, fluid, graceful, and filled with meaning. But as the ceremony neared its conclusion, something unexpected happened. King Thaler, the father of the bride, turned to Talon with a solemn expression on his face. "I have seen you, warrior," Thaler said, his voice carrying through the hall. "You are not of our world, yet I sense great potential in you. Perhaps it is destiny that brought you here." Talon didn't know how to respond. He was just a man, a warrior, not a prince or a ruler. He had no place in the politics of the Eldrians. But as he looked into Thaler's eyes, he saw something more than just a king. He saw a father, a man with the weight of his people's future resting on his shoulders. "What are you asking of me, your majesty?" Talon asked, his voice steady. Thaler looked toward his daughter, Ishara, who stood beside him. She too seemed to be waiting for Talon's response. The air in the hall was thick with tension, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. "I ask you to consider my offer," Thaler said. "Become my son-in-law. Marry Ishara, join our family, and in doing so, unite our people. There is much at stake, warrior. The future of Eldria and of the galaxy rests in our hands." Talon's heart raced as the weight of the king's words sank in. He had not expected this. He had come to Eldria as a guest, not as a potential suitor for the princess. But the more he thought about it, the more the idea made sense. He was a warrior, yes, but he was also a leader, a man who understood the intricacies of alliances and power. His union with Ishara could strengthen the bond between their two species, and together they could face the threats that loomed on the horizon. But the decision was not an easy one. Talon had lived a life of independence, never tied to anyone or anything. He had fought for freedom, not for political gain. Yet in the presence of Ishara, he felt something stirring within him, a sense of duty, of responsibility. Perhaps this was his calling, his chance to leave a lasting legacy, not just as a warrior, but as a leader who would shape the future of an entire galaxy. "I accept," Talon said, his voice firm. "I will marry Princess Ishara." The hall erupted in applause, but Talon's mind was already racing. What had he just agreed to? His life had just taken a turn he never could have imagined. As he turned to Ishara, their eyes met, and for the first time, Talon saw something more than just a royal princess. He saw a woman who was just as determined, just as powerful, and just as willing to fight for her people. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, and together, they would forge a new path for their worlds. Talon sat in a lavishly decorated chamber, his eyes fixed on the royal insignia embossed on the table before him. The symbol of the Eldrian monarchy, a series of interwoven vines and stars, seemed to shimmer under the soft light of the room. He had never imagined his life would take such a dramatic turn. From a solitary warrior, now to be a member of the royal family, his future had been altered in a single conversation. Yet, as he looked at the princess who would soon become his wife, he couldn't help but wonder what this new chapter would bring. Ishara entered the room quietly, her presence commanding but graceful. The silver gown she wore shimmered as she moved, and her violet eyes, so filled with wisdom and strength, met his with a silent understanding. She had been quiet since the wedding ceremony, and Talon knew she was just as troubled by the situation as he was. Though he had agreed to marry her, it wasn't out of love, not yet at least. It was out of duty, a political decision that had to be made, but it was also the beginning of something new for both of them. "Thank you for agreeing," Ishara said softly, her voice steady despite the circumstances. She stood near the window, looking out over the city that was now her kingdom. "I know this must be difficult for you. It wasn't what you expected when you arrived here." Talon studied her for a moment, his sharp instincts reading the subtle tension in her posture. "I didn't expect anything," he replied honestly. "I'm a warrior, not a prince, but you need someone to help you, and I believe in the cause you fight for. It's not about me, it's about what's best for Eldria." She turned to face him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. "And what about you? What do you believe?" Talon hesitated. He had spent his entire life fighting for others, his comrades, his homeworld, and now an entire race he barely understood. His life had been one of conflict, not diplomacy. Yet in her eyes he saw something he couldn't ignore. There was a quiet strength in Ishara that resonated with him. She wasn't just a princess or a political tool, she was a leader just like him. "I don't know yet," he said finally, "but I'll find out, I promise." Ishara smiled faintly, her lips curving up with a hint of sadness. She walked over to the table and placed a delicate but ancient-looking scroll in front of him. "This is the history of our people. It explains the marriage customs, the sacred duties of our rulers, and the expectations we are meant to uphold. I want you to read it, understand what you're stepping into." Talon looked at the scroll, unsure of what to make of it. He had always been more comfortable with the blade than with books, but he understood the importance of this moment. Taking a deep breath, he unrolled the scroll and began to read. The history of the Eldrians was a long and storied one, full of both peace and strife. They were a people of deep tradition, with customs that dated back thousands of years. The marriage of the royal family was not just a personal union. It was a political and spiritual bond meant to ensure the continued prosperity of the kingdom. Every union between a member of the royal family and their consort carried great weight, and Talon's union with Ishara would be no different. He was not just marrying her, he was becoming a part of a lineage that shaped the fate of their world. As Talon read, he began to understand the gravity of what he had agreed to. The responsibilities were immense. Not only would he be expected to rule by Ishara's side, but he would also be tasked with maintaining peace within the kingdom, securing alliances with neighboring worlds, and protecting the Eldrians from the looming threat of the Zarix Empire. The weight of the crown, though not yet placed upon his head, was already beginning to feel heavy. The Zarix Empire had been a constant threat to Eldria for centuries. Their advanced technology and ruthless tactics made them formidable adversaries. Eldria had managed to maintain its independence through diplomacy and strength, but as the galaxy shifted, the Zarix Empire was becoming more aggressive. King Thaler, though wise, had grown older and weaker, and the responsibility for leading the Eldrians had passed to Ishara. Now it was up to her, and now Talon, to ensure the survival of her people. Ishara watched him as he read, her expression unreadable. "Do you understand now?" Talon looked up, his brow furrowed. "I understand. This is bigger than just us. This is about the future of your people and the galaxy." "Yes," she replied softly. "And your people too. The alliance between Eldria and Earth is crucial. If the Zarix Empire succeeds in their conquest, it won't just be Eldria that suffers. The entire galaxy will fall under their rule." Talon's mind raced as he processed the enormity of the situation. He had been a soldier his whole life, fighting battles on distant planets, never fully understanding the larger political game at play. Now he found himself in the middle of that game, with his decisions affecting not only his future but the future of countless others. "I don't know how to lead your people," Talon said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've never been trained for this. I've spent my life in the heat of battle, not at royal courts." Ishara walked over to him, her steps light and measured. "You may not have been trained as a leader, but you have something far more important, the heart of a warrior. You know what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. You understand loyalty, sacrifice, and honor. These are the values that will guide you here, just as they have guided you in battle." Talon looked at her, his eyes softening. "And what about you? What do you believe?" "I believe in our people," she said firmly. "I believe in Eldria's future, but I also believe in you, Talon. We can do this together. You are not alone." Her words, simple yet profound, struck him deeply. She believed in him. In this moment, as they stood together in the quiet of the royal palace, Talon felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He had spent so much of his life fighting alone, trusting only in his own strength. But here, with Ishara by his side, he could sense that the path ahead, though fraught with challenges, was not one he had to walk alone. Talon stood, setting the scroll aside. "We'll do it, together." The moment of unity was brief, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. Over the next few days, Talon and Ishara worked together, learning about the intricacies of Eldrian politics, their customs, and the strategies needed to protect their world from the impending threat. It wasn't easy. There were meetings with advisors, tense discussions with generals, and countless hours spent poring over maps and battle plans. But through it all, they remained united in their goal. As the days passed, Talon found himself more deeply entrenched in the life of Eldria. He spent time in the royal gardens with Ishara, learning about the ancient rituals of the Eldrian people. He attended councils and listened to the concerns of the kingdom's leaders. And slowly, he began to realize that this world, so different from his own, had become his home. He wasn't just fighting for a people he didn't know. He was fighting for a future he could now see, one where peace and prosperity could reign. But even as he settled into this new life, the shadow of the Zareks Empire loomed ever closer. Talon knew that the true test of their alliance would come soon enough. The question was no longer whether they would face war, it was when. And when that moment came, Talon vowed to stand by Ashara's side, ready to fight for the future of Eldria and the future of humanity. Talon stood at the edge of the royal balcony, his gaze sweeping over the sprawling city of Eldria below. The view was magnificent, a perfect blend of nature and technology, the gleaming buildings rising like sentinels from the lush greenery that covered the planet. The twin suns hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the landscape, and Talon couldn't help but feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. It wasn't just the responsibility of his marriage to Princess Ashara that weighed on him, but the future of an entire kingdom, and possibly the entire galaxy, was now in his hands. Behind him, he could hear the soft footfalls of Ashara as she approached. He didn't turn around, sensing her presence without even needing to see her. There was something about her that had captivated him since the moment he'd first laid eyes on her. She was not just a princess, but a woman of strength and determination, qualities that Talon admired more than anything. And as much as he had been drawn into her world of politics and diplomacy, he couldn't shake the feeling that their fates were tied together in ways neither of them fully understood. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with an edge of concern. "Are the Zareks preparing to invade?" Talon turned slowly to face her, his expression grim. "Yes," he said, his voice low. "The intelligence we've gathered points to a full-scale invasion. They've been moving their forces closer to our borders for months. It's only a matter of time before they strike." Ashara's expression darkened, and for a brief moment, Talon saw the vulnerability beneath her royal demeanor. It was a side of her he hadn't seen before, one that she rarely showed to anyone, especially not in front of her people. As a princess, she had to be strong for her kingdom, but Talon knew she carried a heavy burden on her shoulders. And now, with the threat of war looming closer each day, that burden had only grown heavier. "They won't stop," Ashara said quietly. "The Zareks Empire won't stop until they've conquered us. They've done it before with other worlds. Eldria is just another prize to them." Talon stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "We won't let that happen," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "We'll fight, we'll protect Eldria, and we'll stand together." Ashara met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "I wish it were that simple," she whispered. "But they have the resources, they have the technology, and we have so much to lose." Talon's mind raced as he thought about the Zareks Empire. Their fleet was powerful, far more advanced than anything Eldria possessed. The Eldrians had their own impressive technology, but it was designed more for peace and diplomacy than for war. And Talon knew that facing the Zareks on their own terms would be a losing battle. It was one thing to fight for survival, but it was something else entirely to take on an enemy so ruthless and well-equipped. "We don't fight alone," Talon said firmly. "We've already sent messages to our allies, the humans, the Viridians, even the Trelkins. They'll answer the call, we'll form a coalition." Ashara nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Do you truly think they will come?" she asked. "The Viridians have their own conflicts with the Draxians. The Trelkins are distant, and the humans, they have their own problems. I fear that we may be standing alone in this." "We can't afford to be pessimistic," Talon replied. "We need every ally we can get." "I'm not asking for hope, Ashara. I'm asking for action. We need to prepare, train, and plan. The time to wait is over." Ashara looked at him for a long moment as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. "You're right, we don't have time to waste." The next few days were a blur of activity. Talon spent long hours in the war rooms, poring over intelligence reports and strategies. The Eldrians had a vast network of spies and informants, but even they couldn't pinpoint exactly when or where the Zareks would strike. All they knew was that it was coming. The threat was real, and it was closing in. Talon knew that their strength lay not only in their military might, but in their unity. The key to defeating the Zareks Empire would be to forge alliances, to combine their forces with those who shared a common enemy. The humans were the first to respond. sending a fleet of warships and supplies to Eldria's aid. Their leader, Admiral Kira Voss, was a fierce woman known for her tactical genius and unwavering loyalty. She had fought alongside Talon in previous campaigns, and he knew that her arrival would be a game-changer. But the Viridians and Trelkins were proving more difficult to convince. The Trelkins, in particular, were known for their isolationist policies, and the Viridians had been embroiled in their own conflict with the Draxians for years. Despite the challenges, Talon refused to give up. He worked tirelessly, sending messages, arranging meetings, and making promises. He knew that every minute counted, and with each passing hour the danger grew. But he also knew that the Eldrians were strong, and that together they could fight back. Ishara, too, had become more involved in the preparations. Her presence in the war rooms was a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. Though she was still new to the realities of war, she was learning quickly. Her sharp mind and keen instincts made her an invaluable asset to the strategy sessions. As their bond deepened, Talon began to admire her even more. She wasn't just a royal princess. She was a leader in every sense of the word. One evening, after a particularly grueling session in the war room, Ishara approached Talon in the garden. The cool breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and the scent of blooming flowers filled the air. It was a moment of peace amidst the chaos. "I've been thinking," Ishara said, her voice soft, "about what you said, that we need to prepare, train, and plan. You're right. We can't wait any longer, but there's something more we need." Talon turned to her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "We need to unite our people," she said. "All of them, the warriors, the diplomats, the civilians. This fight isn't just about military strategy. It's about the spirit of Eldria. If we want to win, we need the hearts and minds of every Eldrian. They need to believe in this fight, in our survival." Talon nodded slowly, understanding what she meant. The Eldrians were a proud people, but they had never known the kind of war that the Zareks would bring. Their society was one built on peace and harmony, and many would struggle to adjust to the brutal realities of battle. But Ishara was right. They needed to unite as one, or they would fall apart. "We'll make it happen," Talon said, determination in his voice. "We'll rally every person, every warrior. We'll fight for Eldria, for the future." As the days turned into weeks, Talon and Ishara worked together to unite their people. They held public addresses, met with military leaders, and spoke to the people of Eldria. It wasn't easy. Fear was spreading, and many questioned whether they could truly stand against the Zarek's empire. But slowly, the tide began to turn. The Eldrians began to rally around their leaders, and hope, though fragile, began to take root. The arrival of Admiral Kira Voss and the human fleet was a turning point. Her presence on the front lines gave the Eldrians the confidence they needed. The humans brought with them advanced technology and weapons that could tip the scales in their favor. And as word spread that the Viridians had agreed to join the coalition, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The stage was set. The alliances had been forged, and the preparations were underway. The Zarek's empire was coming, but Talon knew that they would not be caught unprepared. The war to protect Eldria was about to begin. The sun had barely risen over Eldria's capital when the first alert blared through the war room. Talon and Ishara had barely closed their eyes for rest when the news came in. The Zarek's empire had finally made their move. Their fleet, massive and menacing, had appeared in Eldria's orbit without warning, their ships blotting out the stars as they descended toward the planet. The invasion had begun. Talon stood up from his chair, his heart pounding in his chest. The moment he had been dreading had arrived. The Eldrian warriors had trained for months, preparing for this moment, but the reality of it was unlike anything he had ever experienced. There was no more time for planning. The time for action had come. "Are our forces ready?" Talon asked, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. Ishara, her face pale but resolute, nodded. "The Alliance forces are in position. The humans are deploying their ships to the front lines, and the Viridians have mobilized their fleet. We have the advantage of numbers, but the Zarek's ships are far more advanced. They've already begun their bombardment." Talon's eyes hardened. "Then we'll need to fight smarter. We won't win this with brute force alone." He turned to the map of Eldria, displayed on the holographic table in the center of the room. The planet's surface was covered in defensive shields and military outposts, but the Zarek's fleet had already begun to breach the outer layers of defense. Talon could see the trail of destruction their ships left in their wake. their firepower devastating the planetary defenses with ruthless precision. Ishara's hand hovered over the table, her finger tracing the path of the enemy fleet. "We need to strike before they reach the surface. If they deploy ground forces, they'll be unstoppable," Talon nodded. "We need to take out their command ship. If we can disable their leadership, the rest of the fleet will fall apart." The tension in the room was palpable as the Eldrian military leaders gathered around, waiting for Talon's orders. They were all seasoned warriors, but this was different. This wasn't a battle for territory or resources. This was a fight for their very survival. Talon could see the fear in their eyes, but he also saw something else, a burning resolve. These warriors were ready to give everything to defend their home. "We'll divide our forces," Talon continued, his voice unwavering. "The Eldrian fleet will engage the enemy head-on, draw their fire, and keep them occupied. The Viridians will flank them from the rear. The humans will use their advanced technology to disable the enemy's shields. I'll lead a small strike team to take out their command ship. We'll hit them hard and fast." Ishara's eyes met his, her expression unreadable. "You're not going alone," she said firmly. Talon glanced at her, surprised. "I'm leading the mission. You need to stay here, keep the coalition coordinated." "I'm not staying behind while my people are in danger," she replied, her voice sharp. "I'm going with you. My place is with you." Talon hesitated. He knew that Ishara was no stranger to battle, but this was dangerous. The command ship was heavily fortified, and they would be facing the full might of the Zarix Empire. He didn't want to risk her life. "I can't risk losing you," Talon said, his voice softer now. Ishara stepped closer, her hand resting on his arm. "You won't lose me. We fight together or not at all." Talon met her gaze, and for a moment the weight of their situation seemed to fall away. In that moment they were not just a prince and princess, but partners united by a common cause. He nodded. "Together, then," he said, "but stay close." As the fleet began to deploy, the atmosphere in the war room shifted. The tension was replaced with focused energy as commanders and soldiers alike prepared for the battle that would determine their future. The humans, led by Admiral Kira Voss, were the first to move. Their ships, sleek and efficient, shot out from Eldria's atmosphere, joining the Viridian fleet in a coordinated strike. The two fleets, though different in size and strength, moved as one, their forces combining in a show of solidarity that made Talon's heart swell with pride. The Zarix fleet, despite their technological superiority, seemed momentarily stunned by the sudden onslaught. The Eldrians, humans, and Viridians were all fighting for the same thing, survival, and the fire in their hearts gave them an edge. Talon knew that the Zarix were not used to facing an organized, united force, and that hesitation could be their downfall. As Talon and Ishara's ship broke through the atmosphere, they saw the Zarix command ship, a massive, dark vessel looming in space like a shadow over the battlefield. It was surrounded by smaller ships, their energy shields crackling with power. Talon's strike team, a small group of elite Eldrian warriors, was already in position, ready to board and sabotage the command ship. The battle in the skies above Eldria raged on, with explosions lighting up the dark expanse. Talon could see the flashes of weapons fire as ships from both sides clashed in a deadly dance. But he couldn't afford to be distracted. His mission was clear: disable the Zarix command ship before it could launch a full-scale assault on the planet's surface. "Prepare for boarding," Talon ordered, his voice steady. "We'll take them by surprise." Ishara was at his side, her hand gripping the armrest as the ship moved closer to the enemy vessel. Talon could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins. This wasn't just another fight. This was the defining moment for Eldria. If they could take down the command ship, the Zarix would be forced to retreat. But if they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. As the ship neared the Zarix vessel, Talon's team readied their weapons. The ship's interior was dark, the halls echoing with the sounds of their footsteps as they moved through the corridors, silently and swiftly. They encountered Zarix soldiers along the way, but Talon's team was prepared. They fought with precision, neutralizing the enemy without hesitation. There was no time for mercy. There was no room for mistakes. Talon reached the command center of the Zarix ship, where he found the leader of the invasion. A tall, imposing figure, his alien features twisted into a grimace. The Zarix commander was surrounded by a group of elite soldiers, all heavily armed and ready for a fight. "You think you can stop us?" the Zarix commander hissed, his voice cold and cruel. This is only the beginning. Eldria will fall just like all the others. Talon stepped forward, his voice low and filled with resolve. Not today. The battle that followed was intense, but Talon and his team fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal. They had everything to lose, and they would not back down. In the end, it was Talon who faced the Zarek's commander one-on-one. The two warriors clashed in a brutal display of strength and skill, each one fighting for their lives, for their worlds, and for the future. Talon's blade found its mark, piercing through the Zarek's commander's defenses and striking him down. The commander let out a final, guttural cry as he fell, and Talon stood over him, breathing heavily. The command ship was theirs. With the Zarek's leadership taken out, the remaining Zarek's forces fell into disarray. The Eldrian, human, and Veridian fleets continued to press their advantage, pushing the invaders back into space. The victory wasn't without cost, but it was a victory nonetheless. Back on the surface of Eldria, the people celebrated their survival. The Zarek's empire had been repelled, at least for now, but the war was far from over. Talon and Ishara knew that they would face more battles in the future, but for the first time since the invasion began, there was hope. The coalition had proven that they could stand together, and that unity would be their greatest weapon. As Talon stood with Ishara on the balcony once again, the city of Eldria stretching out before them, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had won this battle, but there would be many more to come, and as long as they fought together, there was nothing they couldn't face.